Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Okay, we're back for another podcast. My guest today is Greg Kuhn. He's a professional educator, coach, writer, speaker, and podcaster. Greg has been teaching people how to change their beliefs and manifest the reality they truly desire since 2013. Using a method forged in the fires of personal and professional disaster. Greg teaches you how to change your reality and assume your role as the CEO of your life, which all results in finally manifesting your most important desires. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Doug. It is truly a joy to be here with you today.
Good. And part of that intro, it said you're a writer, and Greg and I had a chat a week or so ago, and since then I've flipped on and I've read parts of a couple of these books, which are actually pretty interesting. So I'm going to go straight in and ask Greg to tell us about those books. They were actually, is it 9 books you've got? Nine. And yeah, I read sort of the first part of 2 of them, and I think it was the first and the last book, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. So tell us about them.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction as well. Yeah, Doug, I derive a tremendous amount of satisfaction, and I also torture myself mercilessly because I am an author. The journey to give birth to a book, while it's not laden with the same level of investment as giving birth to a child, there are a lot of similarities. And sometimes, the delivery can be a little challenging. But I tell you what, it is completely worth it. I started writing. I was never somebody who said, "Oh, I've got a book in me." I've got to do that. I've always enjoyed writing. I was a history major in college, so that's what my bachelor's degree is in. So I was published as an undergraduate. I knew I was a good writer and I enjoyed writing. But it wasn't until I came face to face with a approaching Niagara Falls of personal, professional, and financial disaster that it dawned on me that I ought to write a book. And what happened is I resolved that Niagara Falls by using principles that I gleaned from quantum physics and also from the law of attraction. I combined them in a way. I made up, if you will, a belief raising process. And it worked so well in the early 2000s. It resolved. Doug, I was facing $1 million in debt, 15 foreclosures, and bankruptcy. And of course, and also the dissolution of my marriage. So I was about 6 months away from being that guy, who pushed the plunger on his family and blew it all up and ruined a whole bunch of people's lives, including my own. And I said, well, I've got nothing left to lose. I may as well go down doing everything within my power. And I was quite familiar with most of the new paradigms that we were gifted from quantum physics. And we can talk more about that as much as you'd like. And I also knew that there was a body of work called the law of attraction, although I wasn't super familiar with it. It seemed to suggest that some of what I knew about quantum physics might have very, very practical applications in our lives if we apply ourselves to it. And lo and behold, I was correct. The belief raising process that I invented worked so well. I was keeping an ongoing thread in a forum for Abraham Hicks devotees, and I was just posting every day what was happening, what I was doing, and what I was manifesting, and what was happening, and the changes that were occurring. It was so exciting. It was so fantastic, miraculous even. The thread just grew like exponentially, and people were so enthralled with it. I said, I've got to write this down. I have got to share about this in a much broader way, in a much more readily accessible way. And lo and behold, I started the journey of writing a book, and I haven't stopped. So it's a fun ride. The 9th book is called
A
How
handbook for
to
those already born. I know, I read it.
Yes,
Yeah.
a handbook for those already born, how to manifest better versions of reality.
Yeah.
It's different than some of my other books. It was a lot of fun to write. It's been so much fun to parent it now that it was born into the world on September the 5th, just a couple months ago.
Okay. So what I ask you about that, it now when I started reading it, there's a little intro by you, and then it clicks, and it's then for the next 6 chapters or so, it's channeled information, which then the tone changes. And I was like, oh, this is cool, because I've read channeled books before. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I do find them personally like that. But some of our listeners might not quite understand what's going on there. Like, what do you mean? Like, didn't you say Greg wrote the book? So do you want to
Right.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reviewers has called it practical self-help with an esoteric lens. And I like that description. I mean, obviously I'm repeating it. Uh, absolutely, Doug. Channeling is a phrase that is most often associated with an ability to to bring information from the world of energy through yourself as a conduit and then into this space, which of course is space-time, 3 or 4 dimensional space-time, the place where we live. So I personally believe that every human being is channeling by the definition of channeling, because, let me state for the record, every single human being manifests a unique version of life in every moment of their life. That's scientifically true. That's philosophically true. That's spiritually true. That is a statement that would resonate with folks within the realm of what is sometimes called woo-woo. That I don't want to make that a negative term, but it's also true for folks in the scientific field. And there's no opt-out of manifesting your own unique version of reality. It is what humans do. The only choice we have in the matter is whether we want to manifest our life by default or whether we want to manifest it more intentionally. And I don't know about you, although I'm quite certain you're not going to disagree. I found that those really hard to reach places in our life, the big stuff, right? Like health, wealth, our love life, relationships, family, career, those things that are so essential to our fulfillment as human beings. I can't be too intentional about how I manifest those things. So the reason why I mention channeling in my latest book is I'm an avid runner. And when I run myself into flow states where I am unmoored from space and time. I still retain my consciousness. And those who have experienced flow states are very familiar with what they're like. They can be achieved through meditation. They can be achieved through deep immersion in a challenging physical activity. Characteristics of them can be achieved through psychedelics. And there are some other ways to do that. But essentially, when one is in a flow state, our midbrain network is offline for a little while. And the midbrain network is the place where all of those rules we have about who we are and what life is chiseled into stone. So I get unmoored from time and space, and I'm able to experience non-local information. I'm able to tap into coherence like anybody who cultivates a flow state. You, in a flow state, can become coherent with other versions of yourself as well as other people. You become coherent with their energy, and that is an entirely valid and it's an entirely valid scientific finding that can be replicated in a double-blind setting, in a laboratory setting, that human beings in a meditative state, in a true and deep flow state, can become coherent with the energy of their past and present selves as well as other people. But that's ultimately, yes, I write down information as it comes to me when I'm running and I'm in a flow state.
So when you're running, like, do you have your phone and your voice record, or do you just, when you get home, you sit down and write it? Or
done a little bit of two different ways. I have waited till I get back, but what I found is that the best thing to do is to type out bullet points on. I just open up Google Keep, the note app, and I tap in. I'm careful about, of course, about my surroundings when I'm doing that. But it's funny, Doug. I tell you, there are times on runs where I lovingly request the universe to slow down a bit, or just give me a break and let me just enjoy the run, because I just so enjoy going there and receiving that information. I've always been a pretty practical guy. I didn't seek out that channel, and I don't experience it exactly like I've seen other channeling done. But it's undeniable that I am connected to something beyond myself in those flow states, and I think I can speak to what that is, actually.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd like to hear it. Let's go.
Okay, well, one of the first principles that arises from quantum physics that really caught my attention is that you and I are just different perspectives of the same thing. In fact, if we all take a second and look around whatever room we're in right now, everything we see, everything that exists, is just a different perspective of the same thing, meaning we're all the same thing. Okay. I think the best metaphor for us, and this is, by the way, I'm speaking now in the realm of science, right? I could just as easily be speaking as a new age self-help guru when I talk about this, but I'm actually talking about what we're really made of. We're made of energy. We are energy, and we're not a distinct, discrete individual field of energy. We're part of the one field of energy. Sometimes people call it the quantum field. We might refer to it as God. We could refer to it as the one consciousness. There are certainly many ways to refer to it. But the best metaphor for what a human is, and because of our energy state, we are islands in an archipelago. Now, Doug, you used to live on an archipelago, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Isn't that correct?
Yep.
So you know what an archipelago is. Most commonly, an archipelago is thought of as a chain of islands in the ocean. That's not really what it is. It's a gigantic underwater landmass, that's breaking the surface at various points to form islands. But the islands are really part of the underwater landmass. They're just the part above the surface. Well, that's us. That's humans. That's all these material objects here in space-time. We're all islands that are breaking the surface, but under the surface, we're all part of the same thing. And what, of course, that lens is the idea that we can be more influential, that we can play the role of a more powerful architect of the reality that we are manifesting and experiencing. And indeed, that is the case. We can do that.
Very interesting. So you're talking about tapping into these realms. So you're saying that when you go for a run, the frequencies that you can tap into, your radio station changes. Like when you're sitting at home, you're mowing the lawn, or you're cleaning the windows, or you're washing the dishes, you're listening to a different radio station than what you're listening to when, not the first 2 minutes of a run, but like how many minutes does it take you to run to get into this state?
Great question. It's really all about flow states. Flow state is a term that was coined by the Austrian-American psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And one of the requirements, if you will, for achieving a flow state is to have a challenging physical activity, that requires your best efforts to do properly or the way you want it. Well, running does that for me. For me, running isn't about distance. It's not about pace. It's not about elevation climbed. I'm not in competition with myself or previous runs. Running, for me, is the act of taking advantage of the opportunity each moment offers me to use my whole self to hold my body in form while I move myself forward through space. Each moment is the opportunity to do that. And with that focus, because there's a physical challenge that is, sizable, I am able to put myself into a flow state through my physical actions. And usually I start experiencing it somewhere. It usually takes, I like to run for about an hour. I'll start getting into it after about 20 minutes or so. And sometimes they're so deep, Doug, that I snap back into and I was aware of myself the whole time, but I don't really remember running where I ran. Now, I had a vivid and dramatic inner world that was going on during the whole time. I experienced it like, it's almost like there are movies playing that I'm in, but they feel as real as a dream. And I'm able to retain my awareness and be safe around cars and that sort of thing. But it's a very loose and delicate connection with the outside world when I'm experiencing that inner fascination.
Okay, interesting. Are you familiar at all with Dr. Joe Dispenza and his walking meditations?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Have you done a walking meditation of his?
I have not done his specifically. I have a meditation practice that I follow every morning, and I do have an interesting practice to meditate during my active day. But tell me a little bit about Joe's.
Well, it's just in September, he did a Walk for the World promotion where, people all around the world were able to download this free, it's about a 55, 60-minute walking meditation. And so groups formed all around the globe. And so we had a local group here, and I did it. And then last weekend, we did it again. And so you stand still for, I'm going to guess and say 15 minutes, and he gets you into a very deep meditative state. And then he's like, okay, open your eyes. And I live close to the beach, and there's a big, wide, quiet beach around here. So well, in September, there was about 24 of us, and we all then started, we're all listening about 5 or 10 seconds apart because we've individually got our phones and our headphones, earbuds in, and then we all just start walking, as he sort of says. And so you're walking, and he's going, you must keep your eyes open because, for safety. And so off we go, and we walk for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes and then stop again. And quite comical to watch, I'm sure, because here's 24 people, and it's like, people might say, why don't the aliens ever show themselves? And I was thinking, well, probably looks like a bunch of aliens on the beach, all standing still with their eyes closed for 15 minutes, and then all sort of seconds apart, turning and walking down the beach and then stopping again. And so I just figure that he's getting us into that flow state with our eyes closed with the guided meditation. So would that be the same, similar, or different to how you get into when you're running?
There's probably some similarities. The first thought I had listening to you describe that is the power of the other people. That's meditation is the way that researchers have been able to verify a coherence between two individuals that are separated by Faraday cages, which does not allow any energy to transfer from inside and outside. But yet these two individuals who are both in meditative states are able to share information because they bring that intention. So I would think if I were, the next time that you do that, you might suggest to the group that everyone bring the intention to, be connected in your intent. I'm going to imagine that's going to add some oomph to it.
Yeah. And that was the idea, because he did it again last weekend for the 11th of the 11th. So now we're in Australia, so we're sort of, back in September, he suggested it's we do it all when we do it, because otherwise we're doing it at 3 a.m. or something. But all of North America and I think Europe were all doing it at the same moment. I think they had probably at least 5,000 people register or something, and it was for world peace, sort of, So
have you noticed anything since you have done that twice? Is meditation a regular part of your routine?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pretty much every day. And it's 7:30 in the morning here now. So, an hour ago, I was sitting doing a guided meditation. I rarely start a day without it. Anything between 10 and 45 minutes, somewhere like that. So, it's a very regular thing for me. And I used to get hung up if I missed out, but now I just know it's like, it doesn't matter if something happens when I first wake, that doesn't happen. I've meditated for years now, and it's like if I missed breakfast, it's like, it's fine, I can get by till 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. I'm not going to die, just chill out.
I do miss it.
Yeah.
I do miss it.
Yeah.
Like waking up early to catch a flight, and I'm going out the door. I just feel different when I haven't meditated.
Yeah, I had that couple of weeks ago. I had to leave the house at 3 a.m. to head to the airport to get a 6 a.m. flight. But the flight was 5.5 hours. So I had no time to meditate before I chose to sleep as long as I could. But then on the plane, the headphones went on, and I got I was probably meditated for an hour and a half, 2 hours on the plane, sort of, but a little later in the day. So
Trade-off.
Yeah. I still would prefer to do 15 minutes first thing, but excellent. So now I'm curious, when you're channeling this information and you're documenting it for public display in a book, do you ever have doubts come in about that information?
No, not at all. Well, and I would say that I experience self-doubt. That's a regular part of my life, as much as I suppose anyone else. I'm certainly not immune to that. When I am channeling information, the first thing I would say is that it's for me. It's for me primarily. It's personal. It is essentially a curriculum, if you will, that I am shared access with. And so some of that curriculum makes it into my books. It makes it into my podcast. It makes it into my coaching. It makes it into everything I do. What makes it in to my books, my coaching, my podcast, my blog, all of the things that I do, my newsletter, are the things that I apply to my life and that work. I don't share or write about anything hypothetical or things that sound good. I certainly do not repeat things that I've heard other people say. I don't like to write about conventional wisdom. Now, I'm sure there are going to be things in my writing that are similar to what other people write and share, but I only talk or coach things that talk about or coach things that I'm doing that actually work. So when I published the book, I was telling my wife, picture this, we're sitting in the kitchen, and she's like, gosh, and she's a painter, by the way. So she paints abstract landscapes. That's what she's mostly known for. And so she's always putting herself out there. But she thinks I'm really courageous to write a book and put it out. And I can see what she's saying. And she said, well, do you ever worry that, somebody's going to think that's bullshit? And I said, no, I'm not worried that someone's going to think it's bullshit. I know somebody's going to think it's bullshit. But I know it's not. That's the thing. It's an interesting twist that's satisfying. And we've seen this in so many areas of our life. When I'm satisfied, it lessens the power that someone else's discourse can have. While, of course, I'm going to want to listen and learn. I will say this, Doug. I was coming back for a run one time, and I don't want to. The entire book wasn't channeled from a run, from runs. There was a, if you will, conventional writing process, but these downloads greatly informed the content. I was coming back and, I'm writing things down and very often what I'm writing down, sometimes I don't understand why I know that. But here it is. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I know that there are specific individual humans on this earth now and in the future who need to read that. It is for them. I don't know how many, but this is for some people specifically. And my next thought was, well, how does anyone know that they're not one of those people unless they read the book? And I thought, well, that's a clever marketing slogan, but I didn't mean it as a marketing slogan. I was being quite literal. And then once again, my next thought was, well, that really puts a fine point on the importance of me advocating for this book. I want everybody who's listening or watching our conversation to go to Amazon and buy a copy of this book, whether you want, a Kindle copy, a paperback, a hardcover, not because I want to make money, but because this is very, very important information. And Doug, you've delved into it already. It is esoteric.
Yeah.
It's also very practical.
Yeah. And when you said there are certain people on this planet and there's somewhere between 1 and 8 billion of them, it's somewhere in between, need to read that. It's a cog in their life. Like, it's a cog on the sprocket and they need it to help everything else mesh.
Typically,
I was just going to say,
go ahead.
Your wife's wisdom there of you're very courageous, In my life, I find courage is a two-edged sword and I have a lot of courage. But on the opposite side of the sword is fear. And I'm curious, what's your biggest fear?
Well, it's funny. I was sharing with my wife, who is one of my most intricate collaborators, knows me so well, and I make it my business to make sure that she knows me well, because of the value there. And so I'll answer it this way. She was asking me, do I ever feel the goals that I have? So I'm launching a brand new coaching program, and I am asking people to pay me for a very intimate experience of being coached with me, on a one-on-one basis, to manifest your life differently. It'll be a small group experience, and I can talk a little more about this later, but I bring it up now to say that I launched it actually yesterday officially, and 25% of the seats are already filled. In fact, 25% of the seats for my next session in the spring, it's a 90-day program. My next session in the spring, 25% of those seats are already filled as well. So very gratified. But going into it, the audacious claim, if you will, and I mean that in a positive way, to say, hey, world, I'm Greg Kuhn. I'm the law of attraction science guy. I know what I'm talking about. I've got 28 years of highly successful experience, learning and teaching in one of the most successful schools in the United States. I know how to learn. I know how to teach. And I know how to help others learn. Let me show you how to manifest your life better. That's an audacious claim to make, right? It's a scary thing to put oneself out there. And when we were talking about fear, she said, well, do you ever feel overwhelmed sometimes? And I was like, absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. Especially when I look into the future and I put my present self into the future, I'm not there, but I'm pretending I'm there. That's scary, often, very often. And I told her in pretty quick fashion, I'll tell you what, though. And Doug, maybe this will resonate with you too. It's a challenge to say somebody's going to pay me money to coach them, right? It's a challenge to get somebody to pay me money to coach them. That's a challenge. You know what a bigger challenge is, though? Knowing that I'm worthy of being paid money to coach somebody, right? So what's my biggest fear? My biggest fear would be that I ran forward without being aligned vibrationally with the opportunities that each moment offers me, that I ran forward without being centered and focused and in tune with my inner world and reconciled emotionally, and that I incorporated, because of those disconnects, that I incorporated, probably inadvertently, so much fear-based dishonesty that I make a mistake that I'll regret. That's probably my biggest fear, is regret, fear of regret. And you know what, Doug? I heard on National Public Radio, I heard a researcher at Princeton who does research on human emotions, and she said that regret is the most difficult emotion for a human to process. And the most difficult version of regret is the regret of things not done. So, and I was sharing this with my son the other day. How do I address that fear on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis? Well, there's two things: dream big and give my best effort. If I do those two things and I fall short, whatever that means in the moment, well, at least I don't have to look back. I mean, it's one thing to fall short and look back and say, man, I wish I had dreamt bigger. I wish I had, given myself more value and taken better advantage of the opportunities. And it's also another thing to look back and say, yeah, I had a great target. I wish I'd given my best effort. I don't ever want to say either of those two things. So here I am out here in the world doing audacious things. But you know what? That's one of my goals for my business as a writer, speaker, and a coach. One of my 4 primary desires of success is that I have and take advantage of opportunities to be of great value to other human beings. And it is truly a joy to spend my life trying to figure out how to do that, how to be of great value.
Yeah.
What a pursuit,
Interesting. Yeah, when you're talking about regret, it just reminded me when I was in my late 20s, I'd been working as a professional firefighter for 10 years, and I resigned to pack up my 3 young boys and my wife and move to part of an archipelago, a tiny little island just north of the equator in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and build a scuba dive resort. And one of the other professional firefighters, like I had 3 kids, he had 5. He'd been probably 5 years longer as a firefighter. And he came to me and he said, Doug, I really admire what you're doing. But he said, it's too scary. I could never do anything like that. And I said, Bill, you know what's more scary for me? Getting to 60, which I will be in a month, and saying 2 words, if only. If only I'd tried. Because my wife and I at that point were in our late 20s, we'd decided, well, we'll just put it all on the line. We're young and energetic enough that if it goes belly up, we'll just start again, And like we got our first mortgage at 20. We got married at 20, bought a house at 20, had a mortgage. We'd sort of already been into it. And these days, like people when they're 30 often don't even have that here in Australia. And they're just starting to find their way. And we'd already been in a pattern for 10 years and, into it. And it went and it worked and it was great and it was successful. But I have a lot of fears. But fortunately on that one, the courage took over. And all the individual fears were not as big as the thing. Because that's just scary for me to like live in regret. And that psychologist or whoever it was you were talking about before, like, yeah, that really resonated with me. I thought, oh yeah, regret of not acting is very scary. So I was going to ask you, what do you do to overcome the fear? And basically, I think you've answered it by saying you act.
Yeah, well, I would say too, Doug, that certain things in life, and we all know this, there's certain parts of our life that I'll speak for myself. I have never been successful at pretending I don't care as much as I do about the most important parts of my life, my health and my marriage and my fatherhood and my career and my stewardship of my home and my financial acumen, all those things that are for me and many people just beautiful venues to manifest the type of life that we truly desire, to be fulfilled and to have value and to have worth and impact. So I think we're gifted, if you will, with that desire, desire when it's unrequited desire, when I'm not able to manifest the versions of life that I truly desire, that is indeed painful. And at the same time, thank goodness for that desire, because a great desire gets me out of bed in the morning. A great desire causes me to, it motivates me to act as a very aligned ally of past Greg, present Greg, and future Greg, because, you know, all three of those versions exist concurrently. So that's probably you know, we've got a good antidote in our utility belt to walk through fear, or, you know, to motivate us to take steps through fear and find ways through fear.
Yeah. All right. So you're just talking there about the utility belt, and it's, you know, a tool in there. I'm going to talk about a different tool that I think probably fits in. It's appropriate to have on the belt as well. Intuition. How much of a part of your life is that? Is it nothing, a little bit, a lot? Where does that fit in your life?
Intuition and Doug, you know, obviously this is your bailiwick, and you are devoting, you know, your podcast to it. So please don't hear me as telling you, you know, the total lay of the land here. But I will give you my take, is that intuition is about listening, and it's about listening to our inner, we could call it our inner voice. I call it my inner world. I mean, we have so much going on, even physically, let alone spiritually, energetically, uh, within this, you know, system that comprises who we are. We've got, I think we mentioned when we talked last week, we have a second brain. You know, octopuses have a brain in each of their legs, or, you know, the appendages they have. So their brain is spread out through their entire body, which is part of the reason that they can camouflage themselves, change their skin color and texture to camouflage themselves almost perfectly. And for folks that are listening, if you've never seen this, you won't believe how it's uncanny how they are able instantly change.
With our scuba resort, like I've been, you know, within 2 feet of just sitting there watching them with my camera videoing. I've been waiting for them to grab my camera out of my hands, because I've got my finger over, like at the end of their tentacles sort of wrapping around the tip of my finger, and they're intriguing animals. And I've heard if there's one animal under the ocean that is an alien, it's an octopus. Apparently their DNA, everything they do is different to everything else under the water. And and it's not common you can get up close like that to them, but, you know, every couple of months on a dive, you get up one with they all have personalities, and there's just this one, it's super curious, and it makes you follow it for a while, and then it starts to, then after a while, you're starting to move back because it's coming to you very slowly. And you know, it's got 8 legs, and they're like, and you're not sure which one to watch. And you're like, yeah, they're very.
So they all have brains that act independently and allow them this incredible amount of physical functionality. And I just a couple months ago, I was thinking, wow, what would that be like if humans had multiple brains? And then I remembered, wait, we do. We have a second brain. A brain's just a bundle of neurons. It's dense enough that it's able to function in that manner. And we have a dense bundle of neurons in our gut that constitutes a brain that is it has the relative intelligence of a dog, which is very intelligent. I mean, you know, dogs, they can tell what's going on. They can sense when you're in a bad mood, or when you're happy, or when, you know what I'm saying. I don't have to, they're very attuned to what's going on. And so that brain is functioning at all times, and it is communicating with us at all times. As far as I'm concerned, it is to our great benefit to hone our listening skills, to listen to the, you know, we get a very, very low hanging fruit here. The feedback tool that our body uses are our feelings. They're coming at us all the time. And our feelings are constantly letting us know how capable the beliefs we've carried into this moment are at manifesting a version of reality that we desire amid these circumstances. Of course, painful feelings are letting us know that the beliefs we're carrying into this moment are not capable of manifesting a version of reality that we truly desire. Feelings ignored can really keep you blind. I mean, someone that doesn't regularly process feelings is not able to learn from them. You're missing out on an incredibly nuanced and 100% individualized curriculum if you are not taking the time to process your feelings.
Yeah. And yeah, for me, like those feelings, I'm equating that to emotions. Not exactly, but they are. And emotions are a very important part to me of intuition. Like it's, we start to recognize, because you say, like, you get a feeling, and when, intuition started to come online for me, one thing, I was getting physical feelings in my body at different times, and it was a language I did not understand. I was like, what is this? And I would sort of start to recognize that it was intuition because it was different and new. But yeah, it was difficult to interpret, and hence why I started this podcast, because I still don't get it all, but I've got, I can speak. I remember years ago, my dad went to work for a year in the copper mines in Bougainville, which is at the tip of Papua New Guinea. And up there, they speak a language called Pidgin English, which is their local lingo with English mixed in. And, I've sort of, so that the white man and the local there could communicate. They came up with this language that both sides sort of half knew. And I guess I'm just starting to get to Pidgin English with intuition, where I can, it's no longer a completely foreign language. I can feed myself. I can ask basic questions. There's nothing advanced in me at all in these skills, but and I figure there's other people out there like me. But then I have other things, like you said before. All of a sudden, you'll have a deep inner knowing. And I get that as well. And for me, that's like, it's my boys will say, Dad, how do you know that? I just know it, and when did you hear it, read it? Like, who told you? I have no recollection of ever reading it or hearing it. It's just, I know it, and you can't tell me it's not true. Doesn't mean it is true, but it's just how I feel right now. And I believe things like that come intuitively. Yeah.
Oh, well, and to validate what you're saying, I mean, that's a very established scientific principle. It's called noetic science. And a great example of this is I know I love my mother. I can't prove that to you, right? So that's not an out there concept in any way, shape, or form. I love what you're saying about, and I'm using the term emotions and feelings interchangeably for our purposes to explain that. But being fluent in intuition, I've got a really out there theory for where intuition comes from. That's actually incredibly practical, even though it sounds fantastic. Do you mind if I tell you this?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So in the future of humans' timeline, we have undoubtedly unpacked some quantum secrets. Perhaps it's from gravity. We have telescopes now that can see gravity waves. So we're already that far into being able to study and unpack their secrets. So somewhere down the line, we've been able to understand how to unmoor ourselves from the conscription of time. Time is not a universal law. It does not there are things in the universe that are not governed by time. We know that in our everyday experience, things that are completely unaffected by time. So somewhere in our timeline, people have learned how to pull themselves out of time's, tyranny, which means those future humans are existing timelessly, which also means, and by the way, I can't imagine a future where this hasn't happened, where we haven't learned this, whether we want to call it ascending to other dimensions or what have you. But as we, unpack quantum secrets and keep going deeper and deeper. So that means if you're willing to go with me on the logic of that statement, that means that future humans are here with us right now. They're not time bound. They're everywhere all at once. It means they've always been here. And there's no way they're going to be able to communicate with us in a traditional way, because we cannot conceive that type of existence. But what we can do is we can receive and interpret energy. So wouldn't these future humans have a vested interest in us? I'm sure that they love us. I mean, we are them. I'm sure they feel beneficent, but also they have a practical interest in us, growing and evolving and inventing things, because there's certain things that we have to do so that they come into existence, right? I have to meet my wife and bear children. One can be born because, you get the idea, all these intricate connections. So wouldn't it probably be in their best interest sometimes to nudge us towards things that to them have already happened? I think that's highly reasonable explanation for where energetic hunches and intuition might come. I can't prove that, and I wouldn't necessarily plant a flag in it, but it's very intriguing to me. And one of the ways that I play with that, because I do love to explore practical applications of science, especially quantum physics. And one of the ways that I play with that in my life, in my new coaching program, actually, one of the weeks of the 12 weeks that I'm together with my coaching clients, we're going to do a quantum experiment where I teach them to coach their past selves into behavior that they want themselves to have done. Does that sound strange?
No, not at all to me. Maybe some of the listeners are going like, where's he going with this? But to me, it sounds like very normal.
Well, time is a construct. It governs us. Goodness gracious. I mean, I can only physically exist right now in the present. I know no way to supersede that. And then I'm not even interested in superseding that. However, all other versions of me also exist concurrently, because time is not a linear arrow. That's just how I experience it. You experience it. We collapse energy to assemble this space-time that we inhabit. But everything's happening at once. That's what's really happening. So the Doug that, made the cup of tea, that gave him the energy, that allowed him to go on the brisk walk yesterday, that's all happening right now. So when you intentionally say to yesterday's Doug, hey, Doug, thank you very, very much for doing that, you're helping yesterday's Doug do it. And yesterday's Doug, when you were yesterday's Doug, is receiving that information. You received it then because future you, which exists concurrently, was sending it to you then. It's funny for me in a very visceral way. I'll often think, the reason I'm thanking my past self for doing that is because I did it. And my past self did it because I thanked him.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot, and whether that sounds out, I can tell you that game plan, that quantum experiment that I teach, that I use, it really works. It gets better with practice. There's a lot of value there. It's a very practical application of entirely valid science.
So correct me here, like I'm hearing you, and I'm going to use your analogy of me making a cup of tea yesterday. Can I go and say, thank you, Doug, for having that cup of tea yesterday, but instead of making a black tea, I want you to picture yourself using that beautiful, expensive herb tea you've got there that is a lot better for your body. And I want you to experience yesterday drinking that beautiful cup of herb tea because of the benefits that will give to you. When in fact, yesterday I used just a cheap Lipton normal tea bag, but I just forgot to grab the very healthy herb tea out of the cupboard. Is that something that we can do? It's like, can we almost hesitate to use the word correct, suggest that yesterday we acted in a more healthy way than we actually remember us doing? Or am I off track here?
No, you're not off track at all. Let me start by saying my pursuits are 99% of the time. My pursuits are not related to, genie powers, let's say. Okay. I'm not looking to be able to snap my fingers and create a chest of gold. While that would be wonderful, I'm guessing while it is theoretically not impossible that could be done, I have no idea how it would be done. And I certainly have many, many other things I want to spend my time doing than devoting myself completely to that kind of thing. So in a very literal sense, to actually change the past, is that what we're trying to do? I would say no. I would say that it's actually far simpler than we might imagine to change the past. And there's a scientific basis for it in what's called delayed choice entanglement. We can see, and that's part of one of the most famous quantum experiments, the double slit experiment. We can see through delayed choice entanglement that when we make our observation of the unformed energy of the quantum field, it turns the unformed energy into what we are observing it, to be, but it also changes it into that thing all the way back to where it started, even though it wasn't that until we observed it. So when we look up in the sky and we see the light of a star, our observation has turned that energy into photons of light. It wasn't photons of light until it was observed by a human. But when a human observes it and turns it into photons of light, it also turns it into photons of light all the way back to the star that gave birth to it, even though it wasn't that until it got observed. It traveled for millions of light years as unformed energy until we formed it. But to your point of practical everyday application, don't we already do that? Can we take a lesson from what we already do? Here's a good example of that. If I stumble today, well, okay, here's a great example. I'm an avid runner. I developed hamstring tendonitis 3 weeks ago. During the last 3 weeks, I've been rehabbing my hamstring tendonitis. Part of that rehab involved me only running once a week, when I'm used to running at least 5 times a week. Well, during that time that I was only running once a week, I filled all those non-running hours that I was normally running with work that was exciting to do and got me way ahead, made me very productive. Additionally, rehabbing the hamstring tendonitis also gave me this great opportunity to go into much more full and invested use of all my other muscles and muscle systems and my breath, my abs, my lats, my delts, my thighs, my calves, all these other muscles. I'm using them much more fully to support the injured part of my body. So I'm finding new ways to be strong. Well, so that's a great experience. Finding new ways to be strong, finding new, deeper relationships with the various parts of my body, and finding a way to be more productive in my work life. Those are great outcomes. I was journaling about this yesterday. They came from my injury. My injury was a tragedy, Doug. When I realized what was going on, it was the stereotypical, why me? This isn't fair. I don't want this, right? I want to run. I don't want to hurt. My experiences over the last 3 weeks, though, changed my injury into a stepping stone that took me somewhere I want to be. So didn't I change the past? We can do that. We can explore that as much as we want to.
Yeah, very, very interesting concept there. That's so I guess looking for a start, straight up looking at what appears initially to be a tragedy, just taking a step back and breathing and observing it, and how can we move from here? And then it's potentially those your future self showing you a way to develop other areas of your life and get things together that they know that they want you to get. Greg, we need you to be productive in these other areas, and and so very interesting.
My future self is really relying on me, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I can get that. So a question I've got here, I think I know the answer to it, but it's like, do you feel you chose to be on Earth at this time for any particular reason?
Interesting. I can't say that I have any certainty about what happened before I got here and why I'm here. It seems to me, I don't know how you feel about it. It seems to me that I am here to do this, to express God, to express the quantum field, to express the one consciousness, to bring God to life in this moment. And of course, to live a life that is as aligned with my desires as I dare to dream. What do you think? Do you think that you chose to come here, or picked this time, place, family, those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, when I've got 4 older siblings who are considerably older than me, and my parents weren't getting on so well, and my little 4'10" mother had saved up a bunch of cash, and she was about to take the 4 kids and leave the house forever. And suddenly she was pregnant with me. And she was a God-fearing woman, and she was raised in a Catholic orphanage, so she'd in my life. So I'm just curious with other people whether they feel anything like that too.
Did you also hear what that purpose is, or just that there is a purpose?
No, just that there was a purpose. And Mum just said at that time, your initial purpose was to keep her and Dad together. And she did leave him a dozen times after that for 1 to 10 weeks at a time. But at the end, they were still there together, you know. Well, she's still going. Dad recently passed in their 90s. But yeah, they, you know, were together for 70 years. And yeah. So.
I will say that I hope, if you don't mind me being a little lighthearted here, I realized after I had my second child or third child that having children is a pyramid scheme, and it relates to your question because it used to be, when I was childless, that every single human in my, bloodline existed. The primary reason they existed, from my perspective, was so that I could exist. They all had to do what they did for me to be here. But then as soon as I had a child, then I just became part of the downline,
Yep.
Yeah. And maybe that's the purpose. Is there a purpose? Do we have? I like to think that we are. Well, we're all the same thing inside. Of that, I have no doubt. And so when I think of purpose, I would describe it more as how much of the real me, what's really me, is the light of love that we might call God, we might call the quantum field, we might call the one consciousness. It's the archipelago. That's the real me, the light of love. And it's nothing else. So how much of that gets to my outer world? My outer world is a reflection of my inner world. And how much is my outer world a heaven on earth at any moment? How full of love and joy and fulfillment is it? That's a direct correlation to how much of the real me is allowed to radiate and not dampened by inherited beliefs that limit us. I just would love to say this because this occurs to me a lot. I mentioned I'm not seeking the powers of a genie in learning to manifest with more authority. I am seeking love in my marriage. I'm seeking fatherhood with my sons. I'm seeking value and impact with my career. I'm seeking stewardship with my community. I'm seeking rewarding, fulfilling experiences where it's most possible and where it's possible at all. I want as much of that. I want to manifest as much of that as possible. And that's ultimately what drives me. And I think that is that's a shared drive, in probably throughout human history.
Shared with the collective, you mean? Or that we all have that inner desire?
Isn't Doug, yeah, the in my coaching practice, the people that I tend to work with that gravitate to me are people who are very successful. They have spiritual practices, they have productivity practices, they may have manifesting practices, however they're terming them, that work for them, that their life works for them. However, like all of us, there tends to be one or two important parts of their life where there's this glass ceiling. And it's glass because they can see they can see the version of life they want right there on the other side. And it's incredibly frustrating because they're taking good action. They've got the best of intentions. They are working hard, getting to the other side of that glass ceiling and manifesting a version of life they truly want in this area of their life, it would be beneficial for them and everyone else. They're not having to take advantage of anyone else. They're not taking anything away. There's no reason for them not to be manifesting this. It's incredibly frustrating. You and I know that. We've all experienced it. And the honest truth is, I hope that I continue to experience that in my life, because it means that I'm growing, that I'm changing, that my success and efficacy as a human being has allowed me to understand even greater potential and possibility than I previously did. And those are wonderful, wonderful experiences and opportunities. To get to them, however, we first have to experience that we're not where we want to be. And it's an interesting dynamic, you know, a way for me to be authentically grateful for the challenges. I don't wish for more of them, if you will, but most of the most rewarding things that I've ever accomplished, manifested, or experienced have risen directly from the challenges that I've been offered and taken on.
I hear you on that. So going back to the theme of the podcast about intuition specifically for men, do you see, like, do you think there are benefits for men in specifics that this one particular tool for their tool belt being intuition, and you've talked about many other tools in this tool belt. Do you think there's good reason for men to specifically want to develop their intuition?
100%. I'm with you 100%. Obviously, the stereotype of men as non-empathic creatures exists, and obviously there are reasons for that, and we can certainly point to different societal rules and mores that suggest and encourage that type of behavior in men. When you started asking the question, Doug, I have shared before with people, it's challenging for me to form deep friendships. Maybe next to impossible for me to form deep friendships with people who don't have these kinds of discussions that you and I are having. And I think these kinds of discussions are greatly facilitated by being in touch with what's going on inside us. Because you know what? Even if somebody needed some practical encouragement to do it, I mean, we can look at a very common cognitive challenge called cognitive dissonance, right? Where the version of who I think I am doesn't jibe with who I really am. And in parts of my life where I see that in front of my eyes, I mean, I guess you think about, like, I say, well, I'm not really an asshole. You just have to get to know me. No, you're an asshole. That's the definition of that. Cognitive dissonance is so frightening. And feelings themselves, or emotions alone, get a really bad rap sometimes. One of the biggest misconceptions in the world of the law of attraction is that feelings are the source of our reality. Feelings don't manifest reality. I can feel sad all day. I can feel angry all day. It's definitely going to impact my day. It's going to impact my reality. It's going to impact every part of me. The feelings aren't manifesting the reality, though. The feelings are just feedback about the reality that my beliefs are manifesting. And my beliefs, well, I didn't choose my beliefs. We don't choose our beliefs. You as a student of Joe Dispenza, I'm sure you're very familiar with the concept that we inherit our beliefs from our primary caregivers. They're doing the best they can, hopefully, in most cases, but they're human. They're only able to pass along what they already believe. And we inherit them all as little children. We inherit all those beliefs, and then they get stored in our subconscious. And the subconscious is an expert at keeping those beliefs sacrosanct, keeping them safe from influence. It's able to do this because our subconscious does not speak words. It doesn't understand logic. And it does also not understand manufactured emotions. It only understands emotions that match the beliefs that are already in there. Now, there's a whole reason behind this. The subconscious isn't doing this to torture us. It's doing this to keep us alive and safe. Because having unchangeable beliefs, since our beliefs do manifest our life, the beliefs are the interface between me and unformed energy. The beliefs are the commands that I give to the energy to form. The beliefs manifest the form, the function, the meaning, and the value of my entire life, just as yours do. And we already know on a very mundane basis that you and I can look at the same thing. We might be manifesting it in the same form and to have the same function, but has far different meaning and value. And really, all of those four things are so subjective because they are being manifest by our beliefs. That's where intentional manifesting comes in, because I mentioned earlier, everybody's manifesting a version of reality in their life, a version of their life in every moment. When we do that by default, that simply means we're using those beliefs we inherited. And hopefully those beliefs work well in the most important parts of your life. Oftentimes, most humans, especially as they grow and evolve and their horizons broaden, they're eventually going to reach the limits of the beliefs they inherited. And unless we work conscious, play by its rules, most of the things we're doing to try to change those limiting beliefs aren't getting through to the subconscious. They're not actually growing those beliefs themselves. And that's incredibly frustrating, because you know what that does is that eventually leads us to think there's something wrong with us, right? I'm doing all these good things. I'm doing all the right things. And we are, but it's not working. It doesn't work. Obviously, I'm defective. It's a very natural, a very logical conclusion. But it's really just reflective of the fact that where we need to do the way that we change our reality is by growing our beliefs. And the way we grow our beliefs is a lot like leading a small child across a busy street by holding its hand. You know, I mean, the child isn't going to cross by itself. It's too scary. And when we reach down and hold his little hand and start walking him across, well, the child's still scared, but he's not too scared not to do it because you're walking with him. That's how we grow our beliefs into alignment. We take it one step at a time. We do it in a very believable way, and we work with our subconscious. And it's only too happy to allow those beliefs to grow. That's an incredibly rewarding thing to coach people through.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, we've been going for a while now, so I've got one final question for you. Don't need a long answer to it. It might take you, and if it takes you a few seconds to think of an answer, don't worry about that. Just curious, if your microphone was connected to all 8 billion people on the planet right now, and you knew they wouldn't judge you, blame you, or shame you for anything you said, what would you say to them?
I would say two things. I don't even have to think about it. I mean, I might think of different things if I think about it, but First thing, you are God. You are God. Now, let me say, I don't mean you are the God, the one almighty, biblical entity or religious entity. I mean that what's inside you is God. What you really are is God. And anything that gets in the way of that being expressed in your outer world is connected to a limiting belief. And we can grow our limiting beliefs. That's what my books are about. That's what I coach people to do. And the second thing is that reality, our life, let me make it positive. Reality in our life. By the way, I don't know if you can hear, there's some dogs barking in the background. Must be a UPS delivery here. I hope you can't hear it. But our life should inform us, not define us. The reality we manifest teaches us. It guides our ongoing engagement, our ongoing efforts to manifest the life we want. It does not define our value and our worth as human beings. And that difference is so subtle. But anytime I am disparaging myself because of my life, I have deviated from the path, which, frankly, Doug, I've had the pleasure, the honor of working with some incredibly successful people in my life so far. That's a common trait among the most successful people I know, and I emulate it. Life informs me. It does not define me.
Beautiful. That's a pretty wonderful thing to let people know. Yeah, awesome. All right, I'm going to put all of your links to your books and your website, et cetera, that you've sent me in the show notes. And so is there any final thing that you'd like to just share with anyone, apart from, how, they can look to the links for how they can find you, et cetera?
Yes. You know what? I've got a Facebook group that is a great place to connect and plug in. I create exclusive content for the Facebook group every month that I don't share anywhere else. It's a wonderful group of people, and it's certainly a place that you can think of as a hub where you can always stay abreast of, podcasts and programs and coaching programs. I love connecting with people and hearing from them. So that's a great place to start. And I'm pretty sure that you have a link to that
I do.
Facebook group, Doug. I'll make sure you do.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes for sure. Excellent. All right, well, thank you for your time. Absolutely enjoyed it. And I'm sure the listeners have heard some interesting, presumably for a lot of them, new information today. And I would encourage you to get hold of some of Greg's books and have a read. And particularly the latest one that came out in September talks about the channeling, if that seemed to really interest you. So yeah, there it is on the screen. For those of you who are on YouTube, you're seeing that. And it's called A Handbook for Those Already Born: How to Manifest Better Versions of Reality. So yeah, that's great. Thank you, Greg. And thanks to all the listeners. We'll be back next week.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye-bye.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.